The night had a quiet weight to it, the kind of stillness that made every small sound feel louder than it was. It was one of those charity events where the light seemed too bright, the chatter too sharp, and the air too full of people trying to outshine each other. The grand hall glowed with chandeliers, polished marble floors reflected every step, and servers floated by with trays of champagne glasses that caught the light like little stars. In the middle of all that, Ana de Armas stood near the far corner, pretending to be engaged in the polite conversation of two strangers who had already forgotten her name. She had been here for less than an hour, yet it felt like she had been holding her breath the whole time. The cameras near the entrance had followed her when she walked in, but the interest faded quickly. It was a strange thing to be seen so clearly for a few seconds, then made invisible. She had smiled, nodded, answered the usual small talk about films and projects, but her eyes kept drifting toward the exit. She felt the noise pressing against her chest, each voice around her blending into a blur, and with every passing minute she found herself stepping back, almost without realizing it. Across the room, Keanu Reeves noticed before anyone else. He had been in enough rooms like this to know the signs. How someone's shoulders sink just a little, how they look not at the person speaking to them, but toward the way out. Sandra Bullock, standing beside him, followed his gaze and saw it too. She didn't need an explanation. The three of them had shared years of crossing paths in film sets, interviews, and quiet in-between moments. They weren't the kind of friends who needed constant words. They read each other in the space between. Ana excused herself from the half-hearted conversation, her voice soft and polite, and began making her way to the side door that led to the quieter hallway. She didn't look back. She didn't expect anyone to notice. She thought maybe she could step out for some air, collect herself, and leave without drawing attention. But as soon as she reached the door and put her hand on the brass handle, she heard steps behind her. Slow, unhurried, but certain. When she turned, she saw them, Keanu and Sandra. Neither said anything at first. There was no big question, no curious look, just a kind of quiet presence that felt warmer than anything inside that hall. "You okay?" Sandra asked, her voice low enough that only Ana could hear. Ana hesitated. She wanted to say yes, to wave it off, to pretend that she wasn't slowly drowning in the weight of so many smiling strangers. But her lips didn't move. Keanu stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint tiredness in his eyes, the kind you only got from years of being in too many rooms like this. "We're heading out for a walk," he said gently, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Come with us." The door creaked softly as Ana pushed it open, the cool air outside wrapping around her like a relief she didn't realize she needed. The city night hummed with a softer kind of noise, distant traffic, a bus braking somewhere far down the road, the low murmur of voices from a nearby cafe. She stepped onto the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the pavement, and for the first time that night she let herself breathe deeply. Sandra fell into step on her left, Keanu on her right. They didn't crowd her, didn't fill the space with questions. They just walked. The warm glow from the street lamps painted their shadows long and thin across the sidewalk, the three figures moving together in quiet rhythm. After a while, Ana spoke, her voice almost breaking at the edges. "I don't know why. I just felt like I had to get out." Keanu nodded without looking at her. "You don't have to explain." And somehow, those 5 words felt like the most understanding thing she'd heard all night. The three of them kept walking, the distance between them and the glittering noise of the event growing with each step. The night was cool, the street empty enough to feel private, and for the first time in hours, Ana didn't feel like she was shrinking into the background. What she didn't know yet was that this walk, this simple act of stepping away together, would lead to something far deeper than she could imagine. Because sometimes the people who walk with you when you step back are the ones who stand with you when life pushes forward. The city seemed softer once they had left the glow of the hotel behind. The buildings weren't trying to impress anyone here. The sidewalks had cracks, the windows of small shops were lit with warm yellow light, and the air carried the smell of fresh bread from a bakery that had decided to work late. Anna felt the difference with every step, like the night had stopped watching her. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Sandra had her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat, glancing occasionally at Anna, not in a way that demanded anything, but in a way that said she was paying attention. Keanu walked with an ease that Anna found grounding, his pace unhurried, his posture loose. It was strange how quickly the tension in her chest began to loosen, like a knot slowly coming undone. "It's always the same," Anna finally said, her eyes on the uneven pavement ahead. "Those rooms, they look beautiful, but they don't feel real. Everyone's smiling, but no one's really there." Keanu gave a small nod. "Sometimes," he said, "the quiet streets are more real than the crowded rooms." Sandra smiled softly. "And the people who walk with you matter more than the people who just notice you for a moment." Anna thought about that. In those rooms, people seemed to only see what they wanted to see, an image, a role, a face on a screen. But here, with these two beside her, there was no pretending. They weren't walking with her because of who she was in the public eye. They were walking with her because she had stepped back, and they'd decided not to let her walk alone. They turned down a smaller street lined with tiny cafes, most of them closed for the night. One remained open, with a soft light spilling out onto the pavement. The windows were fogged, and inside, a single man sat at a table reading a newspaper. Keanu slowed his steps and glanced at the door. "Coffee?" he asked, as though it were an ordinary night and not one where they'd just walked away from an event worth millions in sponsorships. Anna hesitated. The thought of sitting somewhere quiet, somewhere that didn't expect her to perform, felt like the first real invitation she'd had all night. She nodded. Inside, the cafe smelled of roasted beans and something sweet. The walls were lined with shelves holding jars of coffee beans, and the counter was stacked with pastries that looked like they'd been made with care. The barista, a young man with tired eyes and a warm smile, didn't seem to react to who had just walked in. He simply greeted them, asked what they'd like, and went back to work. It was almost shocking, being treated like an ordinary customer. They chose a table near the window. Sandra pulled her coat tighter around her, Keanu leaned back in his chair, and Anna wrapped her hands around the warm cup when it arrived. For a long moment, they just sat in silence, the only sound the quiet hum of the coffee machine. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, the kind that made Anna realize she didn't have to rush to explain why she'd stepped back earlier. Still, after a few sips, she found herself speaking. "Sometimes I wonder if people see me, or just what they think I am." Keanu looked at her then, his expression steady, almost thoughtful. "People will always have their picture of you," he said slowly, "but the ones who matter will try to see past it." Sandra's voice was softer but just as certain. "And sometimes you have to step away to remind yourself who you really are." Anna let their words sink in. She didn't know why, but she felt like she might remember this moment for years, not because of what was said, but because of how it felt. And outside, the city kept breathing, unaware that three people were sitting in a small cafe, quietly building something far stronger than the noise they'd left behind. What none of them knew was that the night would not stay quiet for long. The first sign that the night was about to shift came as a shadow passing outside the cafe window. It wasn't the usual kind of shadow from someone walking by. It lingered for a second too long, the shape of it sharp and still. Anna noticed it first. Her eyes followed the faint reflection, but when she looked again, it was gone. She told herself it was nothing. But then the door creaked open. letting in a rush of colder air. 3 men stepped inside. They didn't look like they belonged to the quiet world of this little cafe. Their clothes were too sharp, their eyes too restless. One scanned the room quickly, and when his gaze passed over their table, something in his expression tightened. Keanu didn't move much, but Anna could feel the change in him. His posture straightened, his eyes subtly tracking the newcomers. Sandra noticed too. The barista greeted them politely, but the men didn't answer. They ordered nothing. They just stood near the counter, murmuring to each other in low voices. Anna lowered her voice. "Do you know them?" Keanu shook his head, but his tone was calm. "No, but they know us." Sandra glanced between them. "You think they followed?" Keanu didn't answer, but that was answer enough. The men didn't approach immediately, but they didn't leave either. It was as if they were waiting, testing the air, measuring something unseen. One of them kept glancing at Anna, another at Keanu, his eyes narrowing just slightly each time. Anna tried to steady her breathing. "Should we go?" she asked quietly. Keanu's voice was low but firm. "Not yet." He didn't take his eyes off them, but his hand moved subtly toward his jacket pocket, not for anything dangerous, just for his phone. Sandra reached for her coffee, acting casual, though her eyes stayed alert. After another minute, the tallest of the 3 men finally stepped closer. He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that belonged in a place like this. "You're a long way from the party," he said, his tone light but carrying an edge. Keanu leaned back in his chair, his voice calm. "Just getting some air." The man's gaze shifted to Anna. "Funny. We thought you'd want to be where the cameras are." Anna didn't answer. Sandra spoke instead, her voice smooth but cool. "Maybe we prefer places without people like you." The man's smile faded just a little. His 2 companions moved slightly closer. The barista watched nervously from behind the counter, unsure whether to step in or stay out of it. Keanu kept his tone steady, never raising his voice. "If you've got something to say it. Otherwise, you're blocking the door." For a moment, the cafe seemed smaller, the air tighter. Anna felt her pulse quicken, her mind racing with what might happen next. And then, just as quickly as they had come in, the man smirked and stepped back. "We'll see you around," he said, his voice dropping low, almost like a warning. The 3 of them walked out, the door swinging closed behind them. Anna exhaled slowly, realizing she had been holding her breath. Sandra shook her head, her expression a mix of annoyance and concern. Keanu stayed quiet for a moment before finally saying, "Let's finish our coffee, and then we'll take the long way back." Outside, the street was empty again, but the night no longer felt as calm as it had. None of them knew it yet, but that short encounter had set something in motion, something that would follow them long after they left the cafe. The long way back led them through streets where the city's noise softened to a hum. Street lamps glowed like scattered moons, their light stretching across the pavement in uneven patches. Keanu walked with a pace that looked casual to anyone watching, but Anna could feel the difference. He was alert, scanning ahead and behind without making it obvious. Sandra matched his pace, her hands still in her coat pockets, but her eyes sharper than before. Anna stayed between them, her mind replaying the scene in the cafe over and over. The way those men had looked at them, it wasn't just casual curiosity. There was a weight to it, something that felt like unfinished business. "You think they're following us?" she asked quietly. "If they are, we'll see them before they see us," Keanu said, his voice calm, as though he were discussing the weather. But his words didn't erase the unease curling inside her. Every sound, the click of her heels, the faint hum of a street light, the distant echo of laughter from somewhere far away, seemed louder. They turned a corner, moving into a narrower street lined with old buildings whose windows were dark. Halfway down the block, Keanu slowed. "Stop," he murmured. Anna froze, her eyes darting around. She didn't see anything at first. Then she heard it. A faint scuff of shoes against the pavement, quick and light, coming from behind them. Sandra turned slightly, her expression neutral, but her voice low. "They're here." Keanu glanced at a small alleyway to their right. "Come on," he said, and without waiting for a reply, he stepped into the shadows. Sandra followed, her coat brushing against the brick wall. Anna hesitated for half a second before slipping in after them. The alley was quiet, the kind of place that smelled faintly of rain and stone. They stopped halfway down, positioning themselves so they could see both ends. Two silhouettes appeared at the far end of the street they had just left. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. They knew exactly where they were. Keanu's voice was barely above a whisper. "Stay behind me." Anna felt her heartbeat in her ears. She wasn't sure if it was fear or something else, a strange mix of trust and tension. She watched as the figures drew closer, their shapes becoming clearer under the dim spill of light from the street. The same man from the cafe stepped forward, his smile thin. "You left early," he said. "We were hoping to talk more." Keanu didn't move from where he stood. "This isn't the place." The man tilted his head. "Maybe it is." Sandra took a small step forward, her tone cool. "You're wasting your night. Walk away." The man's smile faltered for the first time, but he didn't back down. "You think walking with her makes you untouchable?" he said, nodding toward Anna. Keanu's eyes didn't leave his. "No, it makes us harder to push around." The air between them seemed to thicken, the kind of silence that could break in any direction. Anna stayed still, every muscle tight, waiting for the next move. But instead of stepping closer, the man laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll remember this," he said, before turning away. The others followed, their footsteps fading until the street was empty again. Keanu didn't relax until they were gone. Then he turned to Anna. "Come on, we'll get you home." Anna nodded, but as they left the alley, she knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about leaving a party anymore. Whatever had started tonight wasn't finished. The ride back to Anna's place was quiet, but not the same kind of quiet they had shared earlier in the cafe. This one carried weight, an unspoken understanding that what happened tonight wasn't over. Keanu drove, his hands steady on the wheel, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Sandra sat in the back beside Anna, her presence a silent reassurance. The city outside slid by in streaks of streetlight and shadow. Anna stared out the window, her reflection faint against the glass, wondering why those men had been so intent on them. She didn't know if it was about her specifically, or just about being seen with Keanu and Sandra. Whatever it was, it didn't feel random. "Do you think they'll come again?" she asked softly, still looking at the passing streets. Keanu didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was even. "Maybe. But if they do, they'll find we're not easy to follow." Sandra leaned forward slightly. "And they'll find out they picked the wrong people to play with." Anna tried to smile at that, but it faded quickly. I don't like the thought that someone's waiting for me to step into the wrong place at the wrong time." Keanu glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "That's why you don't walk alone right now." When they reached her building, Keanu pulled up to the side entrance instead of the front. The security guard on duty nodded at them, recognizing all three immediately. Keanu spoke quietly to him before they went inside. Anna didn't hear what was said, but the guard's serious nod told her it was something more than small talk. Inside, the elevator ride felt slower than usual. Sandra pressed the button for Anna's floor, and when the doors closed, the soft hum of the lift seemed to fill the small space. "You should keep the lights on tonight," Sandra said gently. Anna nodded. "I will." When they reached her door, Keanu waited until she unlocked it and stepped inside. He didn't move to leave. Instead, he glanced around the apartment, checking the windows, the balcony door, even the lock on the back exit. Anna watched him, a little overwhelmed by how much care was in each small action. Sandra set a bag on the counter. Inside were groceries she had picked up earlier that week. "You might not feel like cooking, but you should eat something before you sleep," she said. Anna gave a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for all of this. For not just walking away." Keanu's reply was simple. "You stepped back tonight. We walked with you. That doesn't stop just because the night's over." Those words stayed with her long after they left. She stood at the window, looking down at the street, the lights from passing cars reflecting off the glass. Part of her wanted to believe that the men from earlier would just disappear into the night. But deep down, she knew better. And she wasn't wrong. Because a black sedan had been parked across the street for the last 20 minutes, its engine off, its windows dark. Anna barely slept. Even with the lights on, the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic felt too sharp, too present. She kept checking the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see the street. The black sedan was still there. Sometimes it looked empty. Sometimes she thought she saw the faint outline of someone inside. Just after 6 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was a short message from Keanu. "We're downstairs." She didn't question it. She grabbed her coat and stepped into the hallway. When she reached the building's side entrance, she saw them. Keanu leaning casually against the wall, Sandra with a takeaway cup in each hand. Their expressions were calm, but she could see it in their eyes. They'd been watching, too. "We figured you shouldn't spend the morning alone," Sandra said, handing her one of the cups. "And we wanted to see something," Keanu added. His gaze flicked toward the street where the sedan still sat. They didn't rush. Instead, they walked together down the sidewalk, their pace steady, as if they had all the time in the world. Anna could feel the presence of the car behind them as they turned the corner. When they reached a small park 2 blocks away, Keanu stopped and turned slightly, just enough to make it clear he had seen whoever was inside. Sandra stepped forward, her voice calm but unmistakably direct. "You've been sitting there for hours. What do you want?" The driver's door opened slowly. The same man from the cafe stepped out, but this time he didn't have his 2 companions. He looked less certain in the daylight, as though the night had been part of his armor. "You think we're afraid of you?" he said, though his tone wavered. Keanu didn't move closer, but his presence seemed to fill the space between them. "I think you want something, and I think you know you're not going to get it this way." The man glanced at Anna, then back at Keanu. "You make it sound like you can stop us." Keanu's voice stayed level. "We already have. Last night you followed us. Today you've been sitting in a car doing nothing. You know why? Because deep down you're not here for a fight. You're here to see if someone will break. She won't. And neither will we." There was a long pause. The man looked at Sandra, then at Anna again. Something in his expression shifted. Resentment, maybe, but also the faint recognition that this was a fight he wouldn't win. Without another word, he got back in the car. The engine started, and the sedan pulled away, disappearing down the street. Anna let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Sandra gave her a small smile. "And that's how you walk someone home," she said softly. The 3 of them stayed in the park for a while, letting the morning sun warm the air. They didn't talk about the night before, didn't pick apart what happened. They just sat on a bench, sipping coffee, watching the city wake up. And as the light grew stronger, Anna felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a steady sense of safety. the kind that comes not from locked doors, but from knowing who's willing to walk beside you when you step back. In that moment, she realized the truth Keanu had known all along. Sometimes, resilience isn't about standing alone, it's about knowing when to let others stand with you.